Um, we did speak. We spoke about mobile, and the last segue that we had was really who do we speak to? Do we speak to an AI platform? Do we speak to tech? And where's the human element of it all? Uh, Gives me great pleasure to introduce my co-speaker for for the session that we have now, Arthur, who is the CMO and EVP Sales for HCL. Did I get it right? Okay. He and I, when we met, we found a lot of common platforms. We were both born out of sales, and then we led our way into marketing, and we both very strictly feel that we're in the best place today because, and as we talked, we'll discover that as this is the place to be in for the next 10 years. Arthur lives in the US, travels so extensively to India that I think he has done about 170 trips to India. And his boss keeps on asking when will he get his when will he get a citizenship here? Without getting into the citizenship talk, let's get Arthur over.
Good morning. Thank you, Ankur. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, the slides are up there, so hopefully you can track along. I want to spend a little time today. First of all, welcome everybody. How many people are in sales roles? Marketing roles? Okay, a good amount. Leadership roles? Technical roles? All right, 2 more questions. How many people are not in the IT industry? Okay, very few. And who ultimately wants to be a CEO one day? I thought I'd see more hands go up. Should be everybody. But no matter what your career aspirations are, what I'm really excited about is this, as we enter the 2020s, we're this far into this new year, this new calendar year. This next decade is going to be filled with incredible opportunity. But it's also going to be filled with a number of challenges. And I hope in the discussion that we have today that we can give you a couple of points of wisdom to think about how sales and marketing professionals, and really anybody, can take advantage in this next decade. We have such an important role to play. So we're going to share a couple of real crisp, hopefully, concepts with you today. Talk a little bit about the opportunity. We have to discuss the challenge that's in there. And then we want to give you a couple thoughts around actions and things you can implement and do now and think about now that will make you successful over this next year, this next decade, and more. So I'm going to start. I always ask this question of my teams. Anybody know what the world's global domestic product is? You can cheat by looking at the screen. It's somewhere around $85 trillion, okay, to put this in context. $85 trillion for 200 plus countries. And what's really cool is the technology sector, if you take everything, hardware, software, services, cloud, as a service models, engineering, everything all together, it's about $6.5 trillion of the $85 trillion. And there are a number of different technologies that are propelling the growth. And we have one of the bigger growth rates amongst all industries. So, there are traditional technologies, hardware, software, services, infrastructure, engineering. There are also next generation technologies. And there's a lengthy list, and we'll talk about a number of those. But no doubt, one of the interesting facts and my first hypothesis that comes out of this is while technology is only about 7.5% of the world's GDP every year, it is 100% impact on every single industry, every single component of life and society as we know it. So think about that for a second. We in this room represent the most important industry. And there's a certain amount of power and responsibility that comes along with that. Now, I want to share a couple of thoughts that came out of the World Economic Forum in Davos. It was just 3 weeks ago, And a quick shout out to the HCL team that's here as well today, not only for the relationship with NASScom, but we were in Davos, and that gathering is really powerful for anybody that aspires to be there. 3,000 of the world's top CEOs, kings and queens and presidents and prime ministers. And so what you have up on the screen is some thoughts around what is the global agenda? What's on the minds of global leaders that are making decisions every day? And I promise you, you'll see how this comes down and trickles into our responsibility in sales and marketing. Sustainability this year was the number one issue, and it was great to see. Actually, Satya Nadella stood up and said, we have a new policy going into effect. We do business with tens of millions of customers. But if you do not have sustainability, rule number one in your corporate governance, we're going to phase you out of our ecosystem. And you can imagine right away, every CEO started taking notes and sending tweets back to their home corporation. Quick, sustainability's got to be big on the agenda. You know, second big thing, the democratization of data. This has led to borderless societies. If you really look at it, the last 10 or 20 years, borderless societies have been all part of this globalistic movement. And I will tell you, you look at the growth that's taken place in India and the power that India has generated on the global stage, the borderless societies, the globalist nature of all countries has really empowered India to take such a big, strong leadership role. But what's interesting is it's now at threat. You now have, in major countries, 20, 30, maybe 40 autocratic leaders that have basically said, forget globalism. I want the borders sealed, and let's get back to nationalistic tendencies. There might be good in that, but it's also a threat to the global economy, and it's a threat to the business we're all in. The interesting thing is technology truly supersedes what a lot of governments are trying to do. Now, a couple other issues. I want to touch on these real quick. Artificial intelligence is such a great opportunity. It has been probably the number one thought process of every company. How do I deploy it quickly? First, it started out as, I need to rationalize my operations and optimize, and AI is going to help us get there. Now you're seeing it really move into customer experience and the front end of the business, right? We all have bits and pieces in our home. You know, if I say, hi, Siri, something's going to happen funny with my watch in a second. But AI is everywhere. Voice is everywhere. But here's the challenge. Many people are starting to realize that there's been this evaporation of the middle class around the world. And that jobs, one of the big estimates that came out, jobs around the world that are under $20 an hour, 80% of those will be replaced by AI over this decade. So what do you do with people? That's a lot of people in many countries that have to find a new job. Now imagine telling a 40 or 50 or 60-year-old person, hey, your job's been replaced by AI, you need to go to college now or university and get retrained so you can start a new career at the nice young age of 60. How many people will really want to do that? So there's a threat to AI. And whether we like it or not, as much as we all want to promote it and sell it, there are a lot of political movements now saying, put the brakes on, we need to watch the tech companies more closely, right? So that is going to cause a lot of challenges for us to think through and overcome. So I'll breeze through a couple more of these. Data, from a security perspective, a privacy perspective, is becoming it's been a big issue. For 30, 40 years, it's been a big issue. You know, just look at any of the military or intelligence or governments. But here's the interesting thing. There are now political candidates in 30 or more nations that are saying, you know what? These tech companies that are becoming so rich and famous and glamorous, we should go after them. And they shouldn't just pay 1 or 2% corporate taxes. And not everybody that does an IPO should have a Ferrari. We should have more tax. And one of the things they're thinking about that's being proposed in many countries is tax on data. Think about how many times a day you have signed your rights away to your own company to many companies about where does your data go. It's being sold, resold, and monetized. Not a single citizen makes a profit from that. So there are candidates now in many countries saying, let's take a percentage of all that monetization of data and let's give a check and put money in the banks of every citizen. Now, how do you think people outside of our industry will react? Money coming to me for my data? Sure. So we're going to face this movement, and that could impact all of our ability to operate. Diversity, diversity is such a critical issue, and we've been on the forefront of fighting this. In my company, HCL, we've made tremendous movement. I'm excited about this. I'm very passionate about it. But I'll also tell you, when it comes to people issues, immigration is becoming a challenge. I love NASScom. I want to tell you, first of all, thank you to NASScom. Deb Johnny's leadership, tremendous. The executive committee, tremendous. All the member companies, this body, and it's great that we're all gathered here. NASScom is so critical to the future. I spend a lot of time with NASScom in governments. We go to talk to different governments, from Washington to governments in Europe to other places. And we're lobbying on behalf of the Indian tech sector and the jobs we create around the world and the opportunities we're giving people. But one of the interesting issues is we're now having challenges all over the world. It's a lot harder to get people in and out of different countries. I will tell you, France is an interesting country. We visited with France recently, and Macron's government said, we're actually going to take the borders down. Anybody that has technology background, come on in. You're welcome to come live in France. They're trying to attract engineers and computer scientists because they have a problem, and they realize it. I really applaud them for being progressive, but so many other countries are now saying, you don't look like us, you don't have the same passport, don't come in. That is a big problem we're all going to face this next 10 years. Health and disease management, we won't go into that, but I'll also say digital transformation, another top-of-mind issue. And again, all of these things are critical, and my key hypothesis here to you are two things. One, digital transformation, every company says we're doing it. I meet with so many CEOs and CIOs. We have a big digital transformation program underway. And then you talk to them further and you realize they've put a couple of new apps up and they're scared and they need a lot of help. And many companies are in different stages. Digital transformation has a million definitions. I'm going to offer you one. One word, relevancy. Digital transformation, the reason we do it is because 10 years from now, you want to be relevant. Relevant means you're still here, people want you, you're connected, you're appreciated, you're in demand. That's why every company is transforming digitally. My second hypothesis from all these global issues is that if we, and I'll speak to marketers and to salespeople and to leaders, if we put our heads down and we strictly focus on these technologies. Now, one of the things I was asked to do today was talk about what are some of the hottest technologies in marketing. You can see them on the screen. You can go to any website and get a million, here are the top predictions for the next year and 10 years. I think these are all in the mainstream. Customer data platforms, analytics, the merging of ad tech and marketing tech and sales tech all into one platform. These are all critical. Content management, critical, right? Better SEO approach, critical. There's so many great technologies, but if we focus just on this and we do not think of our buyers and those CEO issues that's on their mind, there's an old saying, intentionality of thought becomes reality. And if those CEOs are thinking about those issues, that will become the reality of their companies. How many times does your own CEO say, here's my thought for the week, and then the whole company runs to that direction to make sure it happens? Those CEOs are thinking about those things. We as marketers and as salespeople have to understand this is what's going on. We have to have our heads beyond just looking at a micro technology issue. So I ask you, and Anchor and I were talking about this last night, we want to put that aside for right now. I'm going to share two more things, and then we'll open this up, and we have a couple things we want to discuss. I met with a great company, LinkedIn. They're here. We were in New York, November, December, and let me tell you something. they're sitting on a gold mine. 700 million of the 8 billion people on the planet, so all the top professionals in every industry, sport, entertainment, have a LinkedIn profile. It has become your avatar in the professional world. Think of the data they have from the top 700 million people. They know what time everybody in this room wakes up, goes to sleep, what you're searching for, who you want to connect with, what your passions are, your interests. And, you know, I'll tell you, I give them a lot of credit. They pay tremendous respect to privacy. But they're also thinking and hashing through this. Now, they have created a world-class institute called the B2B Institute of Marketing. And one of their big hypotheses is that the profession of marketing and even sales is under threat not only from AI, but many people are starting to look at sales and marketing as not as important as computer scientists or engineers, and as enablers, not frontline. And they're out to prove that wrong. So they have taken some contrarian positions, and I'll share a couple of those with you, specific to marketing. When we think about marketing and tactics and techniques, share of voice is far more important, and they have 50 years of data to back this up. Share of voice, far more important than share of mind. Think about how much time we spend talking about share of mind and share of market metrics. But their whole hypothesis and data shows this is, if you focus on the market, that market's it's dynamic and it changes every day. You're better off getting as many people knowing about your company and your brand and your ethos as possible. We spend a lot of time on customer loyalty. And their hypothesis is, put that to the side. Don't invest as much, because loyalty changes by the minute and by the day. We're all chasing the same buyers. Many of us in this room have the same customer prospects and targets. How do you get them to be loyal? They could be loyal 1 minute, but the next minute, they're loyal to something else. And by the way, nobody makes a decision by themselves. Whole committees and stakeholders and influencers. So loyalty, we're chasing something that's never going to be 100%. Spend time expanding your customer base. You have better odds at having more customers, and obviously that's going to lead to better loyalty, because people will see there must be a reason they have so many customers. They must be, good enough for a lot of people to go with. The other thing, which is a big criticism of the marketing field, is we spend a lot of time, and businesses in general, we spend too much time segmenting and breaking things down into micro segments. And we're losing ourselves in the weeds. And they prove this with brilliant data. Focus on the masses. You're going to have better odds at growing your business over the short and long term by not spending as much time segmenting and knowing who's got green hair and 4 fingers and likes spaghetti on Thursdays. Right? You're selling to a very small, minute crowd. Think about your own situation. How many emails do you get a day where people are trying to personalize to you? And it's just a chore to open up the millions of emails you get. You end up just deleting everything. You don't have time in the day for all the personalization coming your way. They also say, look, share of mind, invest in being famous. Make your company famous. The rest will follow. That's a B2C concept, right? Do you want to be Nike, or do you want to be a no-name company? Most of the time, people will choose the famous company regardless of the specifications. And their last hypothesis is, forget about rationalism. In this next decade, you better focus on harnessing emotion. That emotion, a lot of decisions, a lot of loyalty, a lot of decisions in your favor are going to come through emotion over rationalism. We're almost over-rational in all of our buying and selling processes these days. Now, I want to open this up, and I'm going to give you a couple of thoughts and tidbits that I'd like to share with you. As I look at this next decade, things that will help make you successful. And I will tell you, no matter what your role or responsibility is, if you look inside your company or your business or your startup, at the very core of the company is your narrative. And that narrative could change weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly. But always go back. That's the crown jewel of your company. And I call it the 5 W's and the 1 H. Who, what, where, when, how, and why. If you can't answer that about your company, and if every employee can't answer that same set of questions, you're lost as a company. You can't sell or represent or promote or become famous if you don't understand who you are, why you exist, what you're doing, who's doing it. That is the core narrative. Second point, and this is a framework we use inside of HCL. We think of kind of a two-dimensional situation. Global at the high end to local. They both have to be balanced. You have to be present and in the community, but you also have to think of global issues, because no company that you deal with is not going to be thinking about global issues and trends and have people there. And then short-term and long-term, that's the hardest thing to balance. Everybody's got budgets. You hear this all the time. It's nothing new. But you have to find a way to invest in both. We talked a lot last night about ecosystems. In fact, I'll take a seat. We'll open up some of this into conversation.
Sure.
But customer experience versus ecosystem experience. You know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so at Entity Data, if we were to think of customer experience, at the heart of a tech organization,
Yeah.
we say that tech is not important. We say it's the client's journey that takes precedence over anything else.
Yeah.
And think about it. Think of Uber. As a service model, what did Uber do? And what did tech do? I think tech came in after Uber said, here is our model, here is what we roll it is in as.
Right.
So that changes. That's one of the things. To that, I would also like us to discuss very interestingly on the borderless model.
Yeah.
Because like, I was introduced, I do try to connect logic and metaphysics. And I really think that it is time, or it is already time in the digital world, that the meaning of country has almost eroded. Think of Euro, where there are a set of rules that allows that entire subcontinent to function the way they are functioning. And to your point, where we say data privacy is really important. So you come into a hotel in India, you still have to sign. If you're a European citizen, you do have to sign off, and you have to allow the hotel to take in your data. That's how strong they have become.
Very interesting. And one of the things I would, as I think of customer experience, in my own thinking, right, I've evolved to this thought of, it's great, and we have, in our company, we stratify our customer segments, and we try to give them unique experiences very custom to their enterprise. But ecosystem experience has really become far more important, even to our customers. Because think of your own situations, right? You have partners, you have communities, you have stakeholders, you have governments that also play a role in decisions. You have analysts and advisors and media and other kinds of influencers. You have social media influencers that impact your relationship even with a customer. So ecosystem actually becomes far more important than just customer. And I promise you, if you leave this conference and you say, hey, customer experience is so yesterday, it's ecosystem experience, you will instantly get people to expand their horizons and see an even broader business opportunity. Points of view. And I don't know how you do it at NTT, but tell me your thoughts about having points of view from within the marketing world to the marketplace.
So well, beyond just thinking of, and we spoke about yesterday when we think of personas,
Yeah.
that we used to talk about 7 years ago. 3 years ago, we spoke digital. Almost all organizations spoke digital. A couple of years ago, as when we started our career as salespeople, we used to think about can technology, as HCL or as entity data, get a foot in the door of the world's top 10 of anything. I think between you and I today, we probably represent our clients who are world's top 10 of everything. So
Yeah.
finance top 10, we serve them, you serve them. Manufacturing top 10, it's the same story everywhere. You think of the industry. And then I think of, when I think of taking a risk, where really is technology today? Is it so inside the ecosystem of everything
Right.
that I think we can safely say that every industry in the world today is a tech industry.
True.
And we can tell
A
someone
global tech
it's a global tech
business.
industry.
Right.
And so today we are sitting at NTLF, which is NASScom Technology Leaders Forum. And I would say that somewhere tech has taken a back seat because tech has developed its own speed, tech has its own ecosystem, and tech actually is the base of everything. So you can tell the world's top manufacturer that you can easily introduce yourself as, hey, I am a tech organization and my focus is manufacturing. I'm a tech organization, my focus is banking. I'm a tech organization, my focus is insurance.
Yeah.
That is what how you would look at it.
And look, I'll lead it to the kind of the next point on this list. And again, I hope you'll all learn from some of these and take some of these home for your own, business environment. Be contrarian. And some of the LinkedIn things I shared with you are considered contrarian. But I will tell you that one of the mistakes that I see companies make all the time, everybody wants to be part of the pack. Everybody wants to have the hot technology that everybody else is glomming onto. Do something different and set yourself apart from the average. And that means having a distinct point of view. It's very hard for companies to do that, to take a non-conservative position. But find ways to separate yourself from the average. And part of the way to do that is to take more, focused positions, translate them through marketing, through traditional technologies, through digital technologies. The next one is real interesting. We have probably in this room lots of IQ. And I would argue that the three most important things the next few years, EQ, CQ, meaning cultural quotient, and transformational quotient. I was going to say innovation quotient, but I didn't want to mix it with IQ. But transformational is the same. These three things will far outweigh IQ. And I will leave you with this hypothesis that sales and marketing professionals will be far more important than computer scientists and engineers over this next decade, because we have to interpret the industry for the rest of the world and vice versa. And so we will play the strongest leadership roles, and hence the reason I'd say IQ, CQ, TQ.
And also part of it, what you said, is when we think of tech, the only two functions that can really humanize tech is marketing
Yes.
and sales. Because tomorrow, I really don't know. I'm not a person who would say 2020. So here's my prediction for the next 10 years. I will be amazed at the end of 2029 that the world would have taken such a different turn. But what I can tell you now is that marketing and sales are one of the few organizations that is going to always be in touch with its client, with the human. The tech functions are going to remain deep in tech because that's really galloping today. Any other function is also going to be really in a sort of a back office kind of an atmosphere. But I think between us and anyone here in marketing and sales, I think give yourself a pat because the next 10 years are yours. You are going to define what is customer centricity, and you are always going to touch upon the humanity, the human aspect of your function. And so I was also telling Arthur that, while we talk tech, while we say marketing gets disrupted every year with everything, the basics of marketing, the very, very essence where we started marketing from, content, creativity, is at the heart of it, and we'll never let go of that.
That's right. It's so much about balance, right?
Absolutely.
Balancing traditional and digital, and to your point, humans and technology. And that will be a big theme, I think, for all of us, is making sure, and we go back to the issue of AI, how do humans and AI, robots, other forms of technology coexist? And it's up to all of us in this room and our brothers and sisters to go define that for the next decade. And I think that's going to be real huge. And the final thing, and the chart's gone, but we had this last point, the X factor.
Yes.
Right? Who here uses the word millennial on a regular basis? Anybody? Guess what? The last of the millennials have entered the workforce. The first of the millennials are now in their mid-30s. They're getting big salaries. They're sitting behind big desks. They're managers and leaders now. But there's a new generation coming in.
And at Entity Data, we very strongly feel and we believe
Yeah.
that India today is poised at a very good place. And I think you would say the same. Because just think about in this room, we represent people from the baby boomers to the generation now. And that workforce, that kind of a cultural connect that we have built with the rest of the world, and to my theory of, the country boundary going away when we think digital, when we think tech, I think we stand at a very unique position to help the world retain the human touch, and as well as gain more and more tech advances as we lead in the technical field.
It's going to be fascinating. And first of all, you're right. All the generations are represented,
Yeah.
both in our workforce and then who we market and sell to.
All of them, and our problems are the same.
But I'll tell you, over this next decade, watch out for Generation X. I have a 19-year-old who's a Generation X. They are socially active, less material driven. They want to blow the world up and start over. And that's the whole generation. And so we're all going to have to think about how do we bring them in and work with them in marketing, in sales? How do we sell to them? The things that millennials and baby boomers wanted to buy or talk about, and the values are going to be very different, and they will overtake the workforce during this decade. And so every time you hear somebody say, oh, the millennials, we must do this with the millennials, correct them and say, no, they're getting old and lazy. It's the Generation X that's now important.
And I take cues from my son. He's a 15-year-old. I had to take him for a test very recently. We reached the zone, we reached the place, and zone is a different thing. We reached the place, and he had forgotten an admit card. I was very upset. I mean, I couldn't think of how can you forget that? And he said, Dad, just dunzo it. He was that cool about it. And I thought, okay, well, he has a point. He has a solution right there. And then he put his earpods, and I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm getting into the zone. I'm listening to Eminem. I wouldn't do that, but that's that generation. It's a mammoth leap for us to try to walk those shoes, but I think that is important. It is very important for us to forget a lot of things that we have been taught that we are so used to, because the new generation is going to teach us, and we got to be open to that learning. That is how we'll be successful.
I think our sons, by the way, must know each other. I have some similar experience. I think, look, I want to just kind of turn to a last point. I'm sure a lot of people are hungry for lunch. I get the privilege, as Anchor mentioned up front, I've been to India over 170 times since the mid-'90s. I feel very, in a lifetime you can't understand what it means to be Indian, but my love and appreciation in this country is so deep. And I also get the privilege of traveling around the world and spending time in a lot of other cultures and countries. This is the decade for India to take an even more powerful position on the global stage. Not just in the country, but on the global stage. I remember being Vittel with your team in Japan, in Tokyo, a couple years back. There's almost 1 million Indians in Tokyo, of a city of 9 million people. Every city you go to, you're guaranteed there is an Indian community. There's probably some great restaurants and several temples and a close-knit group. The influence and the fabric around the world, this is truly the one global nation that has impacted and can influence and change the world for the better. And so I hope you share that same optimism, but now it's up to all of us, right? I do. I look at this like we got this running clock for 10 years, and there are going to be a lot of obstacles in our way, but the world of opportunity is bigger than probably anything in history. So let's uplift people and go take that opportunity. And with that, I think, do we have questions, or do we wrap up? Or
Yep, we could take some questions. One question. Who's the lucky one? You decide. Yes, let's get your mic first.
Hi, my name is Kimaya. I lead marketing for Upgrade Education. My question was around your contrarian points with regards to B2B LinkedIn. Is there anything contrarian that you have done within your organization with regards to marketing, and how has that worked out for you?
So, well, Kamaya, thank you for the question. A couple things. One, I think, and I have a number of my leaders are in the room and around the conference, I think we have all kind of adopted a let's not be status quo mentality. And so we're always pushing at the edges. And I will give you one specific example. One of the leaders in this room, she runs digital and content for us. We looked at all of our social media and our content over the last couple of years. We realized we had over 150 different legacy and next-gen content styles that we were putting out in all types of social media channels. And we said, we have to clean that up. That's the first thing. Let's have a more uniform, modern approach and look and feel. And then we said, you know what? A lot of our content and the messaging we're putting out feels too much like every one of our competitors. And so we took some edgier approaches, provocative. And the interesting measurement of the success of that, and I'm really proud of what this leader and her team has done, all the teams, but I will tell you that we have noticed over the last 6 months, every one of our competitors, including the biggest of the global players, are starting to copy us in look and feel and in message. And what that's also shown us is we got a nice little bump ahead, and now there's starting to be this average catching up, and they're all catching up looking and sounding like us. So now we got to go leapfrog it again. And we're going to push that every day. We're going to wake up with fire and passion and say, being part of the general consensus is not good enough. Be contrarian. Thank you for your question. Yeah.
Good question. And I was thinking of, that we end with being contrarian because that's how you would be successful. At Entity Data, we every morning that we wake up and we look at, how do we be game changers? And that game changer lies in our client community. We go and we discover what is it that our clients are doing that's very different, aided by what we do in tech for them, and then we take their story out in the market. We tell them, we tell the community, we tell the world, okay, here's a client, and here is what he or she or them they have done different. How have they done it differently, and how they are game changers in their own industry. That mentality only arises if every day you get up and you're told to do something, and you ask the question, why? It should never be because that's how it is done. It should be that I would want to do it differently because there is a different way of doing it that no one has thought of before. And that gets me to what I want faster than ever.
Excellent. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. There's no conversation in marketing which I've realized that doesn't end with content and storytelling. So I think that was a poignant close to this conversation as well. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for having joined us here today. Here you go. Thank you so much. I think our photographer is there. Thanks to our circular seating, we are constantly. And thank you so much, Ankur, for chairing both those sessions so wonderfully.